Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. I am your host, Ben Porter, and I'm joined this Independence Day by Thomas Pike of Themeborne Games, designer of Escape the Dark Castle. How are we doing, Tom?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So you are gearing up for a second print run of Escape the Dark Castle.
We are. In fact, the second print run is underway, or in fact just about complete, and that will be getting on a boat over to Europe very soon. And then we've got a brand new Kickstarter project coming up next week, which is the big one.
For 3 expansions for Escape the Dark Castle.
That's right. We've got 2 new, what we call adventure packs, which are nice narrative expansions for the game. And then we have a 3rd expansion, which is what we call the collector's box. And that's a bit of a beauty.
There we go. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But first, let's get to know Tom Pike, the man, the gamer, a little bit more.
Okay.
Yep. So what was your introduction to tabletop gaming?
It's a big question. I think you have to think back to the beginning, to your childhood, when it definitely came into my life. It's when things started. You used to play things as a kid with your family, with your friends. And I remember, just from a design point of view, I do remember being a kid, probably, I don't know, 10 or 8 or 10 or something, being on the floor of a holiday home we were at, designing a game involving Matchbox cards and a pack of playing cards. So I remember from a really early age being very into games, very interested in games and wanting to play and try new things. It started there in the home, in the family, and then continued as a hobby for all of my life from that point onwards, and then became my career after university when I got my first job in the games industry, which is really my first proper job ever at all, and I've been here ever since.
There we go. So you were saying earlier on, just before we started recording, that you worked in games distribution for 10 years?
I did. That was my first career, if you like, my kind of learning. I spent 10 years working in games distribution. I was a buyer, so I was responsible for traveling around to toy fairs around the world and so on, and looking at all the new games and choosing which ones to buy and import and bring to this country and this market. So I was very, very fortunate there for a long time to be exposed to not only all of the games that were released in that decade, but also all of the people involved in making them and the luminaries of the industry to an extent. So that was fantastic, and I'm very lucky to have had that.
So that in itself is a little bit unusual, actually, because we talk to a number of designers on the show, and more often than not, they work in jobs that maybe don't have very much to do with the games industry, but perhaps there's some transferable skills within what they do. And what you tend to find is that gaming for them is a hobby up to that point where they transition to becoming a game designer. But all of your working life, you've been around games.
It's true. And I think that's perhaps a little bit unusual. I think a lot of people follow a very similar path to mine, in that they work somewhere for a long time and then decide to, at a certain point in their life, to quit or make a change and go it alone or set something up, which is what I did. But it so happens that I was coming from the industry, so I had a lot of insight and experience already in this market. So that was definitely in my favor, and something I still draw on every day. And
you feel that experience and insight, as you call it, has stood you in good stead since you've started Themeborne?
Absolutely. It's invaluable stuff that it's hard to value because I just have it, and I just acquired it over a long time. It's not something you can just get, or which I can advise that you go get. It's not that easy, but yes, as it happens, I was fortunate enough to do that for a long time, and it really does stand you in good stead for when you try to make your own entry into this industry.
I'm sure it does. So we've talked a little bit about what led up to you ultimately becoming a game designer, and you've talked a little bit about the fact that you were in the industry for a time prior to becoming a designer. But what sort of games do you consider your influences as a designer?
That's a good question, and the answer is infinite. There's so many, but I think the things that sort of stand out that are on the tip of your tongue when someone asks you that kind of thing is twofold. It's the old stuff, things that you were exposed to early on, which would have shaped it, and then your sort of more recent sort of cerebral research when you really were looking for something specific and trying to find it. And I think for me, the early stuff is fighting fantasy game books, Hero Quest, some of this late 80s, early 90s stuff. That was definitely part of what I was into, naturally drawn to and experienced. And then in later life, when I'm sort of seeking out cool gaming experiences, it would be stuff like D&D and epic fantasy narrative, things like that.
So you're very much rooted in the sort of gothic fantasy type games?
Pretty much. I do love it. I do love it and always have. And it's sunk in over the years. All this exposure to all this stuff has kind of been absorbed and processed and comes out now in Escape the Dark Castle. But that's not to say that's the only thing I was interested in. But that when you ask me what the influences are, that's the answer. That's the first bit for sure. That's the large chunk.
Well, you're definitely a man after my own heart then. So moving on now to Escape the Dark Castle. It's been described by a number of people as a gateway game.
Right.
Is that something that you were aiming for with the game?
In a way it was. What we were aiming for more specifically was for this to be a game, and this I'm about to explain a gateway game in more words than needed, but our goal wasn't to make a gateway game. Our goal was to make a game for people who love this sort of two or threefold, but one of them was for people who love fantasy and these themes, and like you said, this gothic or medieval inspired fantasy, but who are they like those themes and those subjects and all this stuff, and they wouldn't really want to sit and play a board game for 3 hours or read a 300-page rule book, or they wouldn't, perhaps a bit too cool for it, and wouldn't really go and do that. But they like the artwork, and they might watch a film, or they might have a tattoo about it, or listen to music with these same themes. So it didn't make sense to us that there's all these people on the edges who aren't playing games, and we wanted something that would bring them in, that they would feel okay about playing, that wasn't too long or too complicated or took too long to set up or was really geeky and boring. That would bring them into our geeky center gradually and easily.
Sure. So do you see gateway games as being vital within this industry?
Yes, because we have to keep bringing people in. Otherwise, it'll peter out. And I think we're very fortunate to be living through a massive boom in tabletop games anyway. And that's for a variety of reasons, but undeniably one of those reasons is the excellent gateway games that are bringing people through, and there's always room for more of them. We are nowhere near having reached our potential as an industry and as a group of creatives as to what we can achieve and who we can appeal to, and we're really just getting into the cool stuff now, and it's important that we have games like ours and like the others that just allow people access to this wonderful stuff.
It's constantly evolving, isn't it? And what I think one of the things that we've mentioned a couple of times in the podcast, and one of the things that I'm quite excited for, is up until this point, there's a very clear divide between analog games and digital games, but now the lines are starting to fudge, aren't they?
They are, and they should do. It makes no sense. It's all entertainment, and there's no reason why any one medium should stick to its own and not overlap. There's massive crossover for all this stuff, as there should be, and it's only going to become more so, and that's for the better. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's exciting times indeed. So, Escape the Dark Castle, we talked a little bit about your influences, the old choose your own adventure books, and the old school RPGs. One of the things that's been said about Escape the Dark Castle quite a lot is that it very clearly evokes those choose your own adventure games of the 80s and 90s. Was nostalgia a conscious design decision for the game, or is that just something that appeared quite naturally?
We didn't think of it as, quite in those terms of nostalgia being a selling point, although that it has turned out to be. But what we wanted was, one of the goals was to make a game that all of us wanted to play and that our non-gamer friends and these people on the periphery I've mentioned would want to play. And we could not find that product, that game. And I, from my previous career, I had been exposed to a lot of games, and I bring these games, and it would just never be quite right for all of us and meet all of our tastes. Set out to do this game, and one of my co-designers, Alex, had this idea that the atmosphere and the artwork of what we loved from these choose your own adventure books and fighting fantasy and so on just wasn't represented in the market today. These lovely black and white hand-drawn illustrations that were just visceral and just captured a fantastic kind of spirit of adventure and atmosphere. And they were just done in the time, by the way. They were, instead of color, it was cheaper to do black and white. And I think that it inadvertently created this amazing atmosphere. And that was not represented on the market today. And we wanted to do something that captured the same atmosphere. So yeah, it was very much going for that. Whether or not we thought would really strike a nostalgic chord, we hoped it might, because it should. But the result has been far better than we ever imagined. It really has struck an emotional chord with people, and that emotional connection to the game is why we've had the small success that we've had so far. I'm convinced of that.
So it more emerged out of a desire to recreate something that you guys had experienced previously than this is something we specifically want people to feel when we play this.
Yeah, it was all about the feeling and the experience, and trying to, as you just said, trying to recreate something we either experienced or imagine or think that we experienced. If we, you can never quite revisit that, but in our mind's eye and in our memories, that's what it felt like, and we tried to capture that and put it into a game for now. And it's had this amazing effect of striking a chord and bringing back wonderful memories and nostalgic feelings for people who were around then and played those games, and then for young kids or just people who didn't do any of that, they are now discovering that style through this game, which is amazing. And then they are led to discover the real stuff, not the real stuff, but the older stuff as well. So I just think it's made a nice link between that old stuff which passed on and died out, for whatever reason, as we moved into digital stuff and all these other styles. But these other styles just don't have the same feeling and there's a lost element there that we wanted to revive.
That's quite an interesting one, actually. Talking about reviving something that a lot of people haven't necessarily experienced, because I myself came to tabletop gaming quite late on, like in my early 20s, and it was through Warhammer. So yeah. I missed the bus when the Choose Your Own Adventure books were first on the market. Yeah. And what I gravitated towards with Escape the Dark Castle was the monochromatic art style. Which you said was completely by accident initially.
Well, it was by design. We wanted to capture that, but we didn't know quite the effect it would have. We just thought it was a great style that was perfectly valid, even though it wasn't done anymore. We sort of felt, why isn't that? It's kind of, in a way, for us, the best style. So why doesn't anyone do it? So we've just revived it. But it's funny you mentioned Games Workshop and Warhammer there. It is actually also very like early GW stuff, and it struck a chord for those players as well. It could almost be an early Games Workshop product in some ways.
Well, you even use the same typeface in a lot of the games as well, don't you?
Well, it's similar. We haven't used any specific typeface from any previous products, but we've got one that looks like it could have been from several different things. People often make that mistake.
Yeah, I think I nearly landed you in trouble there, but we dodged the bullet.
I don't think we would be in trouble even if we had used somebody's actual font, but we didn't. It's none of them, but it looks like all of them, and that's the whole point, and that's what we're doing with the whole game, is for it to feel like an old friend or something that you've played before or you've seen, but you haven't. It's new. But it just gives you all those lovely feelings and the gameplay experience to match. So
when we were chatting at AirCon, I don't know if you remember this, but I put my foot in it a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, I don't remember that bit. What was that?
Because I put my foot in it because I had flicked through the Tabletop Gaming magazine for that month.
Yeah,
I mentioned, I saw you were featured in Tabletop Gaming magazine. and it wasn't the greatest review that you'd had. But how do you respond to criticism such as that you received there?
We don't really. We don't need to. There's no.
Why not? Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing. I mean, we had, that was a bad review. We've had, I don't know, 20, 30 reviews, and I think probably 28 of them have been overwhelmingly positive. So we had a couple of bad ones. One of them was that one, and that's fine. It's, reviews are the opinions of the reviewer.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, even a bad review, people read it and they see the game. And we've had people who've said, "Oh, I saw that review and bought it because despite what was said, I thought it looked great and I love it." So we don't take issue with anyone over reviews or try and counter their arguments. They can do what they like, say what they like, and people can make their own judgments, which they have been, fortunately for us.
It's quite interesting that you were saying that there, though, that sometimes a bad review can end up having the opposite effect of what you would expect, particularly if it's a reviewer that someone's maybe got a bone to pick with. They maybe don't like a lot of the opinions they have, and then they read a review where they say this game's terrible, and they think, well, what does he know? I'm going to go out and buy it and play it myself.
Yeah, I just think that's all that kind of stuff is far too personal. It's a big industry. There's plenty of room for everyone. We don't. It doesn't really matter what reviews you get. It's really how the players respond to the game. It would be unfortunate if they completely took the view or opinion of one review and didn't actually check out the game for themselves. That would be a shame, and I'm sure that happens. But it's that's just part and parcel of being a publisher. Is there's always people who love it and there's people who don't.
You're not going to please everyone, are you? And I think the moment that you do, that's when you start making things that are mediocre.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the criticisms I have seen, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way, some of the criticisms I've seen are compliments to me. I read them as compliments. They criticize, they say, "Oh, it's like a game from the 80s." And, that's a huge compliment, and that's exactly what we were going for. So even some of these things that you mentioned are critical. They're not really from a certain point of view. They're actually things we were trying to achieve. So there's that as well.
Yeah, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Pike of Themeborne is a masochist. So going back to the tabletop gaming review, one of the things that struck me about that review in particular was that I personally felt that individual had misunderstood what the game was trying to do. And I have to say that this isn't just something that I've noticed with Escape the Dark Castle. There's a couple of reviews I've read for other games where it's been quite clear to me that the individual reviewing it hasn't got, in inverted commas, what the game's been trying to do. Do you feel that that's something of an issue within tabletop gaming, that games are either being misunderstood or misrepresented, and that it's coming out in reviews and in the way that the customer base respond?
It can be. I mean, for that review in particular, I don't feel that way. But I think in general, it's a problem in all industries with all reviews. Is how, you sort of think, well, how it's one individual, and it shouldn't be given perhaps as much credit or attention as it is what one reviewer thinks. I mean, if you happen to find a reviewer who you always agree with, then that's great, but that seems pretty unlikely. So I don't know. It's a tricky one. Yeah.
I think with reviewers and publications, it's a bit like shopping for a jacket. You're never going to get a jacket off the rails that fits perfectly. You just have to go for the closest size.
I tell you what I will say, and this is how I feel about this, is I don't really care what the reviewers say. If we get a good review, it's lovely, and if there's a horrible or nasty review, it feels bad, of course. But we don't really do it. It doesn't change what we're doing. we didn't make this game to try and get good reviews, and we don't change the game based on bad reviews. What does matter to us is the fan feedback and the community, and we are lucky to have a really great community of players already, even though we're only a couple of years old, who give us amazing feedback, and we take that feedback and we do improve the product and the product range using that feedback. That's the feedback that matters to us, and the stuff we care about.
Absolutely. So moving on, expanding the game. How do you decide what you want to add to the game without changing it in such a way where it either becomes unrecognizable from what it was originally, or it just breaks it all together?
That's a really good question. I mean, we conceived this game, and by that I mean the base game, the main game of Escape the Dark Castle. It was always intended to be the start, or the starting point of a game system, a series of products. We wanted it to be a complete standalone game in its own right, fully playable forever. If that's all you ever buy, you've got years of wonderful gaming in that box, and that's fine. But it was meant to be the foundation stone of a larger range. We always designed it that way. So we're now in the nice position that it's done reasonably well, that we can start taking those steps that we have laid the groundwork for. But I think that's really important. I think if you make a game and then decide at the last minute to expand it, or after the fact, it can be a real problem, and you can end up wrecking the original thing. We've built this to be expanded, so it's ripe for that. We've got this lovely system where with each adventure pack that we add to the game, we introduce more chapter cards, which are the mainstay of the game, the bulk of the narrative and the story and the game. And adding those simply gives you greater variety. It doesn't mess with the game in any other way. But what we also introduce with each pack is a new mechanic or two, and we in almost every case allow those mechanics to be for the players to pick and choose. So before they start, they choose which modules they're going to play with, which rules, which cards, and away they go. So they'll be able to tailor the game, and especially as the range grows, they'll be able to tailor the game to really perfectly suit their group, their level of complexity, and so on.
So it's almost a bolt-on approach to expansion.
Exactly. They can, and also the expansions can be played as standalone themed sets within themselves, or they can be mixed in, or you can choose, and you can tailor it to your level. What I would say is Escape the Dark Castle in this form, this edition, is never going to be a super complicated strategy game. No matter how many expansions we add, we're not going to take it to Gloomhaven, sort of levels. It's always going to be a 30-minute easygoing adventure game. You can turn that up a little bit with some of these expansions for it to be a bit more involving and complex, but it will always occupy this position of easygoing adventure.
Well, I think that's exactly the appeal of the game, though, isn't it? Escape the Dark Castle is the kind of game that you want to play, where you play when you just want to hang out with your friends, have a few beers, and roll some dice. Whereas Gloomhaven is like a job in itself, getting that to the table.
So it can be, and that's great. And sometimes you want that, and there's definitely people who love that, and I love that. I would definitely do that too. But with Dark Castle, we're doing something else, which is this other thing. And as you said, people do it that way. But it's a game that people play last thing at night with some drinks and put the soundtrack on and turn the lights down and really do it. It's something people just play kind of sitting around. People have told us that they do it as a bedtime story with their kids instead of a book. They play the game, and families play it on the kitchen table on a Sunday morning. And it's amazing that the usage kind of demographic and the feedback that we get is so varied. It's unbelievable. We thought it would all be fantasy fans, and people playing it, with a drink and a whatever else they might enjoy and playing music, but it gets it's much broader than that. As you said, it's starting to sort of have this gateway feel to it that we weren't fully expecting. So that's interesting.
I've seen quite a few people in the groups that I'm in on Facebook, and it's been guys saying that they've actually managed to get wives and girlfriends who had no interest in games playing this.
This is absolutely huge, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of about the game. It's like I think I said earlier, we were trying to get people who are kind of on the periphery and non-gaming partners of gamers. the conversion rate is, I don't know what it is. It's hard to keep track, but we get a lot of that feedback. People who say, my partner who doesn't play games played this one and now asks to play it. And I think the best one we had, somebody said that their wife or girlfriend wasn't into gaming. He showed her this game. They played it. They liked it. He said one day he came home from work and found her playing it. So
that's brilliant.
And that things like that are just priceless. And that's why we make games. It's for this, to hear about that sort of experience and know that we've contributed our little thing to this great tapestry of games that we all enjoy.
So one of the things that struck me when I was playing Escape the Dark Castle was that you could take the bare bones, the story engine, if you want to use that term, and you could apply that to a number of different themes. Is that something that you're interested in exploring in the future?
Definitely. That was always something that we had in mind. As I said, we've laid the groundwork for that now. So we've got this system, this series that can go in any direction, any genre, any setting. We definitely want to do that. However, Castle is so new, and these expansions are just, we're just exploring the castle, and it's way too soon to be moving on and having new settings and so on. But that is very much the roadmap for the future, is to see where else we can go with this theme, and we will be doing that. As long as things continue to go well, we'll definitely be doing that. But there's a lot more Castle to enjoy in the meantime.
Yeah, it's exciting times ahead. So that's just about all we've got time for. But just before we finish up, if people are interested in Escape the Dark Castle and they want to purchase a copy or they want to get expansions for it, where do they go?
So the most important thing to say on this is to Kickstarter. We have a new Kickstarter campaign going live on the 1st of June 2018, running for the month of June. And that has two goals. One, introduces a range of new expansions and add-ons, almost all of which are driven by our fan community feedback. So they really work and really fit with the game and just make the whole experience better. And the second thing is to bring in new people to the fold. So you will be able to get through this campaign pretty much everything we've ever published, the base game, the first expansion, and get up to speed immediately with where we are. So it's a great jumping on point as well.
There you go. Tom, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And for all of you who are listening, wherever you are, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Hi guys, it's Josh from the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast here. Thanks for listening to us, and now be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for the Unlucky Frog Gaming. You can also show your support for Unlucky Frog through Patreon. Be sure to check out our website www.unluckyfrog.com to find out more.
Was that so hard?
Look.